I cannot lose my grandson. The plea escaped Ilara's parched lips as her little Leo's fever consumed the last flicker of hope. Their last pennies had dwindled away, and a cure for the boy's mysterious illness seemed a distant dream. Blinded by despair, the elderly widow dragged herself through the ruins of an ancient royal road, where wild vegetation swallowed memories of a glorious past. It was there, amidst the rubble and heavy silence, that her tired eyes caught an indistinct shape covered by centuries of moss and oblivion. A carriage. Its rusted metal creaked with the wind, its wheels sunken into the damp earth, but something in that relic of time compelled her to approach, to force open its corroded doors. And what she found inside would change not only her life, but the history of an entire kingdom. The door, once imposing, yielded with a metallic groan, revealing an interior consumed by darkness and time. The air was thick, laden with the smell of mold and a forgotten past. Ilara, her heart beating erratically, groped her way, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The faint light filtering through the cracks revealed luxurious seats, now torn, and in the center, covered by a thick mantle of cobwebs and dust, a rectangular volume. A chest. Not an ordinary chest, but a piece of exquisite craftsmanship, its edges carved in patterns Ilara had never seen, wrapped in a fabric that, despite its deterioration, still exuded a trace of fine silk. Each step towards the object felt like an eternity. Hope, long dormant, now pulsed with an almost painful force. Her wrinkled hands trembled as she touched the cold, dusty surface of the chest. The clasp, complex and ornate, was stuck, resisting her efforts. Ilara's mind flew to Leo, his pale face and gasping breath. The urgency of the situation infused her with renewed strength. With a muffled cry of frustration and determination, she used her body weight, forcing the clasp. A dry snap echoed in the carriage's stillness, and the lid sprang open, revealing a glow that defied the darkness. Inside, amidst layers of disintegrated velvet, lay objects that seemed to have come straight out of a fairy tale. Crown jewels, sparkling under the faint light, with precious stones that captured and reflected the few rays of sun. There were emerald and ruby necklaces, golden diadems, bracelets that seemed to weave light itself. Royal artifacts, some bearing familiar symbols of a coat of arms Ilara barely remembered seeing in old tapestries, rested beside the jewels, each telling a silent story of power and opulence. She took one of the jewels in her hand, feeling its cold weight, and a tear traced a path down her time-worn face. But what truly caught her attention, hidden beneath ancient brooches, was a rolled parchment. Cautiously, Ilara unrolled it. It was not a map of lands, but an intricate family tree, detailed with elegant calligraphy and small miniature portraits. Her heart leapt when her tired eyes fixed on a name. Ilara de Valois. And just below, a name that made her hold her breath, Leo de Valois. The date, the symbols, the lineage. Everything pointed to an unimaginable truth. Her family, impoverished for generations, was linked to royalty. This was not just a treasure, it was proof of a lost legacy, the key to a stolen identity. The shock was overwhelming, the air seemed to thin in her lungs. Ilara felt a whirlwind of emotions, disbelief, anger at the denied past, but above all, a wave of hope so vast it threatened to drown her. The jewels, the artifacts, the map. All of it meant life for Leo. It meant an end to hunger, to despair. Her fingers tightened around the parchment and a glittering emerald. The vision of Leo, weak and sick, was replaced by the image of a future where he would be cured, strong, worthy of his name. The dignity she thought she had lost now seemed to return, for the memory of her ancestors and for the future of her beloved grandson. The journey back would be arduous, but now Ilara had a purpose, a treasure, and a truth to carry. Ilara knew that every second was precious. With trembling but firm hands, he began to organize the treasure. He couldn't take everything. The sight of the crown jewels, diadems, and ancient brooches was unreal, a burden of hope and responsibility. He carefully selected smaller but undeniably valuable pieces: a pearl necklace with a sapphire, 2 golden bracelets, and a brooch with the fleur-de-lis, symbol of Valois. He wrapped them in the moldy silk fabric, creating a discreet but heavy bundle. The parchment, irrefutable proof of his lineage, was kept close to his chest. The rest of the treasure he hid in the chest, closing it and covering it with branches and dry leaves, promising to return. The evening light tinged the sky orange and purple. The forest, previously silent, seemed to awaken with whispers and shadows. Ilaro felt the weight of the bundle, not just physical, but that of an uncertain future, of Leah's life hanging by a thread. Each step back along the abandoned path was a battle against fatigue and age. His legs, weak from hunger and worry, ached. His heart, however, beat with a long, unfelt strength, driven by the image of Leah, his granddaughter, with feverish eyes and labored breathing. "For Leah," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "Everything for Leah." Ilaro's mind was racing. How could his family, so impoverished and forgotten, be linked to such wealth and power? The injustice of generations of suffering weighed heavily on him. His parents, grandparents, all lived and died without knowing the truth, without being able to claim what was rightfully theirs. A silent anger simmered, but it was quickly replaced by the urgency of the present. There was no time for lamentations. There was Leah, there was the village, where distrust and gossip were common currency. He needed to be cautious and cunning. When he finally spotted the first flickering lights of the village, a sigh of relief escaped him. The sun had already set, and darkness embraced the humble homes. Ilaro crept through the alleys, avoiding curious glances. The bundle clutched tightly against his body. The door of his small cabin creaked softly, revealing the gloom and heavy silence, broken only by Leah's faint breathing. He rushed to the side of the makeshift bed, kneeling. Leah's face was paler, her lips dry and cracked. He touched her forehead, still warm. A wave of despair almost overwhelmed him, but the promise of the jewels kept him steady. Carefully, he hid the bundle under a loose floorboard, a secret that could not be revealed to anyone, not even to curious neighbors. The truth about the treasure needed to be revealed at the right moment, so as not to raise suspicions or envy that could put Leah and him in danger. That night, Ilaro barely slept. He watched Leah, his heart torn between the anguish of her illness and the euphoria of his discovery. The parchment, still under his clothes, seemed to burn against his skin, a constant reminder of the legacy. Tomorrow, at dawn, he would need to act. Find a discreet buyer for one of the jewels, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions, who understood the urgency. The first step towards Leah's salvation was about to begin, and with it, the difficult journey to unravel his family's truth and restore the dignity that had been stolen from them. The first ray of sun peeked through the window crack, painting the dirt floor with a pale, cold light. Ilaro, who had dozed off sitting beside Leah, awoke with a start, his body stiff and his mind alert. His tired eyes, still heavy with insomnia, fixed on his granddaughter. The fever seemed to have subsided a little, but her breathing remained weak, a tenuous thread of life that bound him to reality. He touched Leah's forehead with his wrinkled palm, feeling a less intense, but still worrying, warmth. A heavy sigh escaped his cracked lips. The urgency of the day propelled him. There was no time for hesitation. With slow and painful movements, Ilaro stood up, his knees creaking in protest. He walked to the dark corner of the cabin, where the loose board hid his new and dangerous hope. With an effort he lifted it, revealing the moldy silk bundle. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the fabric, and the soft gleam of the pearl necklace with sapphire and the golden bracelets revealed itself in the gloom. They were pieces of a beauty that violently contrasted with the misery of his home. The crucial question now was, where to sell. The village, with its gossip and curious glances, was a minefield. Any false move, any sign of unexpected wealth would raise suspicions and could attract greed. Ilaro knew that envy was a disease as cruel as the one afflicting Leah. He could not risk his granddaughter's safety or his own. His eyes narrowed in contemplation. There was the market in the neighboring town, a day's walk away, but with the promise of greater anonymity. There, among the crowd of merchants and buyers, perhaps he could find someone discreet, a jeweler who wouldn't ask unnecessary questions. The decision, though difficult, was the only sensible one. He could not trust anyone in the village. The image of Leah's pale face reinforced his determination. Carefully, he selected only the brooch with the fleur-de-lis. It was small, but undeniably valuable, and less conspicuous than the necklace or bracelets. He hid it in the inner pocket of his old tunic, along with the parchment of his lineage, which seemed to burn against his skin. The rest of the jewels were again hidden under the floorboard, a secret that weighed on his soul. Before leaving, Ilaro knelt again beside Leah. His eyes welled up at the sight of his granddaughter's fragility. He held her small, feverish hand, kissing it tenderly. "Grandpa will go and come back, my love. He will bring your cure," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Leah merely moaned softly in response, turning her face away. That gesture broke Ilaro's heart, but it also ignited a flame of resilience in his chest. He needed to be strong for her. With a last look at the cabin and his sleeping granddaughter, Ilaro left. The fresh morning air bit his wrinkled skin, but he barely felt the cold. Every step along the dusty path was an act of faith. The journey would be long and exhausting for his tired bones, but hope, once a dying ember, now burned with renewed strength. He felt the weight of the brooch in his pocket, not as a burden, but as a promise of life for Leah, of justice for his family, and of a future that until yesterday seemed impossible. The road to the city was unknown, but Ilaro was ready to face it, driven by unconditional love for his granddaughter. The road to the city was longer and more treacherous than Ilaro remembered. Each step raised dust that irritated his dry throat. The sun, high in the sky, beat down on his wrinkled skin, and the heat made his head throb. His bones, accustomed to the stillness of the cabin, protested. He felt the weight of the brooch in his pocket, a constant reminder of his mission, but also a burden of responsibility. The dense forest seemed to watch him, its shadows dancing, evoking ancient fears of wolves and bandits, dangers he had long thought he had left behind, hidden. Thirst tightened its grip, and his mouth was so dry that speaking was impossible. Ilaro stopped by a stream, the crystal-clear water flowing over stones. He knelt with difficulty, his hands trembling as he scooped up the cold water and brought it to his lips. The relief was immediate, but brief. The image of Leah, with cracked lips and fever, haunted his thoughts. He chastised himself for every weakness, every sigh. Leah needed him strong, and he could not fail. His love for his granddaughter was a fire that burned in his chest, warming him against the cold of fear and uncertainty that enveloped him. He continued his journey, his pace slow but steady. With each mile, the landscape changed. Trees gave way to cultivated fields, and the smell of wood smoke was replaced by the aroma of manure and the distant murmur of voices. The city approached, and with it a new wave of apprehension. Ilaro had never felt comfortable in crowds. The simple life of the village, despite its privations, offered solace in familiarity. Now he was about to plunge into a world of strangers, where cunning and distrust always reigned. Upon reaching the city gates, the sight was overwhelming. Crowded carts, shouting merchants, odors of spices and sweat mingled in the air. Ilaro felt small and insignificant, a speck of dust in the chaos. His eyes swept the crowd, searching for a friendly face, a sign, but found only indifference. He clutched the brooch in his pocket, feeling the relief of the fleur-de-lis. He needed to find a jeweler, someone who could appraise the piece and, more importantly, buy it without indiscreet questions. The task seemed impossible. He had no experience with such a transaction, and his heart pounded with anxiety. The fear of being cheated, robbed, or worse, accused, was palpable. He remembered the village stories about the cruelty of city dwellers, about how the innocent were easily exploited, but the image of Leah, pale and weak, reappeared, dispelling the fog of fear. He was not there for himself, but for her life, for her promising future. Ilaro took a deep breath, straightening his shoulders. He was not a thief, nor an impostor. He was a desperate grandfather, fighting for his granddaughter's life. With this new determination, he began to walk through the narrow, busy streets, his eyes fixed on shop signs, looking for a sign of where to find a jeweler. At every corner, hope and fear alternated in his chest, a constant duel that kept him alert, driven by a love that would transcend any obstacle. Leah's journey to healing was just beginning, and Ilaro was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Ilaro walked through the city streets, his wrinkled eyes scanning the shop facades. The din was deafening, a cacophony of voices, laughter, and the creaking of carts. He felt like a fish out of water, his simplicity contrasting with the opulence and haste of the city dwellers. With each step, the brooch in his pocket seemed to vibrate, a heavy secret that propelled him forward. He spotted a wooden sign hanging above a narrow shop, "Goldsmith." Ilaro's heart leapt. Holding his breath, he pushed open the wooden door, which creaked in protest. The interior was dark and stuffy, with the metallic smell of gold and silver. Behind a polished wooden counter, a corpulent man, spectacles perched on his nose and a shrewd gaze, looked up. His eyes swept over Ilaro from head to toe, a mixture of disdain and curiosity. "What do you want, old man?" he asked, his voice harsh without a hint of warmth. Ilaro felt his blood run cold. This was not the jeweler he was looking for. He shook his head, muttering, "My mistake," and backed away, the door closing behind him with a thud. Humiliation burned on his face. But the image of Leah, pale and weak, came to his mind, and he clenched his fists. He could not give up. There were other jewelers. He continued his search, ignoring the curious glances and muffled comments. The city seemed like a labyrinth, each corner hiding a new disappointment or a new challenge. Finally, on a less busy street, he found another shop. The sign, though more modest, displayed a hammer and an anvil. The door was ajar, and a more inviting light emanated from within. Ilaro hesitated for a moment, but Leah's urgency was greater than his fear. He entered. The atmosphere was smaller, but welcoming, with gleaming tools hanging on the walls and a workbench filled with delicate pieces. A man with grey hair and calloused hands, but with a gentle smile, rose to greet him. "Good day, sir. How may I help you?" said the jeweler, his blue eyes conveying a rare kindness. Ilaro felt immense relief. This indeed seemed to be the right man. With trembling hands, he took the fleur-de-lis brooch from his pocket. I need to sell this," he said, his voice hoarse, extending the piece. The jeweler took the brooch carefully, his experienced fingers examining the intricate piece of gold and emeralds. His eyes widened slightly, and a flicker of recognition passed through them, but he maintained his composure. "An ancient and very valuable piece, sir," said the jeweler, his voice calm. "Where did you get it?" Ilaro swallowed hard. It's from my family. An inheritance," he replied, avoiding the man's gaze. The jeweler nodded, without pressing further. He knew that some stories were best left unquestioned. He picked up a small magnifying glass and began to inspect the brooch more closely, testing the metal and the stones. The silence in the shop was almost palpable, broken only by the ticking of an old clock. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, the jeweler looked up. "It's an authentic piece of great quality. I can offer you a good sum for it, sir." enough to buy the best medicines and still have a good amount left over. He named a value. It was much more than Ilaro had ever dreamed of. A wave of gratitude and relief washed over him. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he nodded in acceptance, unable to speak. The jeweler, noticing the old man's emotion, smiled warmly. "I see it's something important to you, isn't it?" Ilaro merely nodded, wiping a tear with his wrinkled hand. The money was handed over in heavy coins, and Ilaro held them tightly, feeling the warmth of hope. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice choked. "Thank you very much." He knew the journey was not yet over. Now he needed to find the pharmacy, buy the medicines, and return to Leah as quickly as possible, bringing not only the cure, but the promise of a future. Ilaro clutched the coins, his heart beating with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice choked. The jeweler nodded. Ilaro, feeling lighter, turned to leave. The journey was not over. He needed the pharmacy, the medicines, and to return to Leah as quickly as possible, bringing the cure and the promise of a future. As he left the goldsmith shop, the city's bustle seemed less oppressive. His eyes scanned the streets in search of a pharmacy or apothecary sign. The image of Leah, pale, was a constant reminder of the urgency. He could not waste time. Ilaro was already walking away down the street when he heard a voice call him. "Sir, wait!" It was the jeweler, who had come out of the shop and was gesturing with a serious expression. Ilaro's heart leapt. A chill of fear ran down his spine. Had he noticed something wrong? Distrust resurfaced. He hesitated, but the honesty in the jeweler's eyes compelled him to stop. "Yes?" Ilaro asked, his voice trembling. The jeweler approached. "Forgive me for stopping you, sir, but the brooch you sold me, the fleur-de-lis, it's a very old and specific symbol, from the coat of arms of the House of Valois." He paused, observing Ilaro. The old man's eyes widened slightly, and he clutched the parchment to his chest. "For years, I have studied the history of our region. The Valois were a noble lineage who mysteriously disappeared. They say the last heir was taken away and a great family treasure was hidden." Ilaro felt the air thin. The revelation was an unexpected blow. This man knew more. Fear mingled with a strange sense of recognition. "And what does that mean?" Ilaro managed to ask, his voice almost a whisper. The jeweler, sensing his apprehension, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It means that perhaps you are not just an old man selling an inheritance. Perhaps you are part of a larger story. I have a friend, a historian. He has dedicated his life to researching the Valois. He could help you understand what you have in your hands, and perhaps to claim what is rightfully yours." The proposal was audacious, dangerous. Exposing his secret to a stranger was an enormous risk. But the mention of claiming what is rightfully yours echoed in his heart, a call to justice for his family and for Leah. If the jeweler was right, the treasure could be the key to a lifetime of security and dignity. Ilaro looked at the jeweler, his eyes moist. The decision was monumental, to trust or to flee. His love for Leah was stronger than any fear. He needed help. I accept your help," Ilaro said, his voice firm. "But my granddaughter is sick. I need the medicines first." The jeweler smiled with understanding. "Of course, sir. Let's go to the pharmacy. Afterwards, I'll introduce you to my friend." Ilaro felt new hope blossom. Leah's journey had gained an unexpected dimension, and he was ready to face it, with an ally by his side. The jeweler, whose name Ilaro would come to know as Master Gabriel, nodded, a gentle smile illuminating his wrinkled face. "Let's go, sir. The pharmacy is just a few streets from here." Ilaro followed him, the weight of the coins in his pocket feeling like a miracle. Each step was lighter, propelled by the image of Leah, now no longer pale and weak, but with a spark of life in her eyes. The city, once an oppressive labyrinth, now seemed less hostile, almost inviting. Master Gabriel's presence by his side was an unexpected comfort, a bridge between his world of privations and the promise of a future. They arrived at the pharmacy, a small establishment smelling of dried herbs and ointments. The apothecary, a thin man with spectacles, attended to them with professional seriousness. Ilaro, his voice still choked with emotion, described Leah's symptoms. Master Gabriel intervened, explaining the urgency and the need for the most effective medicines. The apothecary, after listening carefully, brought several vials and packages, explaining how to use each one. The cost was high, but Ilaro did not hesitate. He handed over the coins, feeling a deep relief as he saw the medicines in his hands. Leah's cure was there, tangible. With the medicines carefully wrapped, Ilaro felt a new wave of gratitude for Master Gabriel. "I don't know how to thank you, my friend," he said, his eyes moist. The jeweler merely smiled. "There's no need to thank me, sir. Seeing hope in your eyes is reward enough. Now, about my friend, the historian. He lives not far from here. Would you like to meet him now?" Ilaro nodded, his heart beating with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. He knew that the truth about his family was a burden as great as the treasure, but the promise of justice for his ancestors and a secure future for Leah propelled him. They walked a few more streets to a modest but well-kept house with a small library visible through the window. Master Gabriel knocked on the door, and a white-haired man with curious eyes opened it. "Friend Arthur, what a pleasant surprise!" exclaimed Master Gabriel, gesturing to Ilaro. "I've brought you someone who may hold the key to the Valois mystery." Arthur, the historian, looked at Ilaro with an intensity that made him feel exposed. His eyes, accustomed to unraveling ancient secrets, seemed to scrutinize his soul. "Come in, please. Gentlemen," Arthur said, his voice calm but with a glint of excitement. Inside, the house was a sanctuary of books and parchments. The smell of aged paper and ink hung in the air. Ilaro sat in an upholstered chair, feeling a little out of place amid so much erudition. With trembling hands, he took the parchment from his chest, unrolling it carefully. The image of the coat of arms and the ancient words revealed themselves. Arthur took the parchment with reverence, his slender fingers tracing the writing. His eyes widened, and a gasp escaped his lips. "By the heavens," he murmured, his voice almost inaudible. This is authentic. It's the Valois coat of arms, and this is a genealogy, irrefutable proof." Arthur looked up at Ilaro, his eyes shining with contained emotion. "Sir, you are not just a man with an inheritance. You are the inheritance itself, the last link of a lineage we thought lost forever. This changes everything." Ilaro felt a shiver run down his spine. The truth, once a vague hope, now materialized before him, heavy and real. Leah's journey to healing had transformed into a quest for justice and a forgotten legacy. Ilaro felt the air thin, Arthur's revelation hitting him like a lightning bolt. The parchment, which he had guarded so carefully, was not just a map to a treasure, but the key to an identity he had never dared to dream of. He, an old, impoverished widower, was the last link of a noble lineage. His eyes welled up, not only from emotion, but from the vertigo of that truth. The humility of a lifetime of privations violently collided with the grandeur of what he had just heard. Master Gabriel, noticing Ilaro's shock, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's overwhelming news, I know, sir, but Arthur is the greatest expert on the Valois in the entire region. If he says it's true, it's because it is." Arthur, with the passion of a scholar, continued, his eyes gleaming. "The coat of arms, the calligraphy, the names, everything fits perfectly with the fragmented records I possess. Official history says the lineage died out, but there have always been rumors of an heir who escaped, taken to a safe place, far from court intrigues. Your parchment is the missing proof, the lost link. He gestured to the bookshelf filled with books. I've spent decades looking for something like this. The House of Valois was one of the most respected, holding lands and influence before its mysterious fall. Elaro, still trying to process everything, shook his head slowly. But how? I've always been a simple peasant. My parents, my grandparents, they never mentioned any of this, only that we were from an old family who lost everything. His voice was a whisper, laden with disbelief. It's understandable, sir, Arthur explained gently. History suggests that the escape was planned to be an absolute secret to protect the last heir. Perhaps your ancestors kept the truth hidden for their own safety, to avoid persecution or greed. Anonymity was the best protection. Elaro's mind turned to Leah. The weight of that inheritance was not just about him, but about her future. The dignity he sought for his granddaughter now transformed into a much larger legacy, with implications he could barely comprehend. And what does this mean now? What should I do? He asked, his voice firmer, his determination for Leah overcoming his fear. Arthur and Master Gabriel exchanged a look. It means we have a long road ahead, sir, said Arthur. Claiming a lost lineage is not simple. There will be skepticism, perhaps opposition. But with this parchment and the jewels Master Gabriel described to me, we have irrefutable proof. We will need lawyers, documents, witnesses, and above all, discretion and patience. Master Gabriel added, and wisdom, sir. The world of nobility is full of pitfalls. But don't worry, you won't be alone. Arthur and I will help you every step of the way. Justice for your family is something we both value. Elaro looked at the two men, their faces serious, but full of an honesty he felt in his heart. The human connection he had so longed for now manifested in an unexpected way. He had found allies, gratitude flooded him, and he nodded, feeling a new strength grow within him. My granddaughter Leah. She is the priority. I need to go back to her, give her the medicines afterwards. Afterwards, we will see what fate holds for us, Elaro said, his voice choked, but with a renewed spark of hope in his tired eyes. Leah's journey to healing had transformed into a quest for a legacy, and he was ready to face every challenge, not only for his granddaughter, but for all the Valois who came before him. Master Gabriel and Arthur, understanding the urgency, accompanied Elaro to the historian's door. Go with God, my friend, Gabriel said, shaking the old man's wrinkled hand sincerely. We will be here when you need us, and remember the truth, however heavy, always illuminates the path. Arthur, with a thoughtful and serious look, added, Guard the parchment well, sir. It is your irrefutable proof, and take care on your journey back. Elaro nodded, unable to utter more words, his throat tight with emotion and gratitude. The farewell was brief, but laden with deep meaning, sealing an unexpected alliance. As he left the historian's house, the sun was already beginning to set on the horizon, painting the city sky with vibrant shades of orange, pink, and purple. The city, once an oppressive tangle of sounds and smells, now seemed more distant, its lights beginning to flicker like small stars in the deepening twilight. Elaro breathed deeply the fresh night air, smelling baked bread from the bakeries and the fireplace smoke rising from the chimneys. The urgency to return to Leah was a burning fire in his chest, but his mind was still processing the magnitude of the discovery. He, a Valois. The idea was so grand and overwhelming that he could barely contain it within himself. His steps were firmer now, not only from possessing the precious medicines that would ensure his granddaughter's life, but from the newfound dignity that enveloped him. The brooch, sold, had fulfilled its first and vital mission, but the parchment, kept with reverence and care close to his chest, was the promise of a future he had never dreamed of. He imagined Leah, her young eyes shining with health and vivacity, running through the fields, free from the shadow of the illness that tormented her. This vivid image propelled him with renewed strength, dispelling accumulated fatigue and the apprehension that still stubbornly manifested itself. Night fell completely as Ilaro moved away from the city gates, leaving behind the lights and the bustle. The path back, which once seemed a desperate escape, was now a road to hope, illuminated by the promise of a new beginning. He was no longer alone. He carried with him not only the life-saving medicines, but the responsibility of an ancestral legacy, the support of new and loyal friends, and the unwavering certainty that Leah's life would, at last, be saved. The darkness of the forest, which once evoked fears and dangers, now seemed protective, guarding his newly revealed secret. He thought of his parents, his grandparents, all the generations of his family who had kept the truth hidden, sacrificing their own identity to protect the last link. He felt a deep and indescribable connection with them, an unbreakable chain of love, resilience, and sacrifice that linked him to the past. The honor of his ancestors now rested on his stooped shoulders, and he knew he would not fail. With each step, Ilaro felt Leah's presence, as if her small hand were in his, guiding him. The promise of a dignified future, of a full and happy life for her, was his beacon. The village, his humble cabin, everything awaited him, and he would return, not just as Grandpa Ilaro, but as the bearer of a new era for his family, a vital link between the glorious past and a bright future that was opening up. The journey was long and arduous, but Ilaro's heart was filled with a peace and determination he had never known before. He was going home, bringing healing and the seed of a new and promising beginning. Ilaro continued his walk under the starry mantle, each step echoing the urgency that pressed against his chest. The forest, once a labyrinth of shadows and fears, now seemed like a tunnel to hope, the trees whispering ancient secrets that aligned with his own newly discovered history. The damp smell of the earth and the nocturnal chirping of crickets were his only company. As he hurried, the medicines for Leah firmly secured in a bundle, and the valuable parchment, a treasure of truth and identity, pressed against his heart. He felt the weight of responsibility, not only for his granddaughter, but for an entire lineage that depended on him to be restored. The image of Leah, with her fine hair spread on the pillow, her skin pale and her eyes dull, was a tireless engine. He needed to reach her to see life return to her eyes. Finally, the flickering lights of the village appeared in the distance, small points of warmth and life in the vast darkness. A sigh of relief escaped his lips. The cabin, humble and familiar, was there, waiting. As he approached, the silence of the night was broken only by Leah's faint crying, a sound that pierced Ilaro's heart with acute and renewed pain. He opened the door carefully, the creaking of the wood seeming deafening in the silence of the small house. The dim light of a lantern revealed Leah curled up in bed, trembling under the thin blankets. Her eyes, seeing him, widened slightly, a thread of hope mixed with exhaustion. "Grandpa!" "You're back," she whispered, her voice so weak it could barely be heard. Ilaro knelt beside the bed, his hands wrinkled and trembling. "Yes, my flower. I'm back. And I brought your cure." He unwrapped the bundle with the haste of someone racing against time, revealing the small vials and packages. With all his tenderness and care, he prepared the first dose, following the apothecary's instructions. Leah, with a visible effort, swallowed the bitter liquid, her eyes fixed on his, seeking comfort and security. Ilaro helped her lie down again, covering her carefully, and sat on the edge of the bed, holding her small, feverish hand. The night advanced slowly, each minute an eternity. Ilaro watched Leah, looking for any sign of improvement. The fever seemed to subside a little, and her breathing, once so labored, was now a little softer. He stroked her hair, praying in silence, a prayer of gratitude and supplication that came from the depths of his soul. The parchment, still secure in his chest, seemed to warm him, reminding him of the promise of a future. But now, his only concern was the present, the life that was slipping through his hands. Near dawn, Leah opened her eyes again, and this time there was a different sparkle in them, a faint flame of recognition and relief. She managed a small smile, almost imperceptible, but which for Ilaro was worth more than all the gold in the world. "Grandpa, I'm thirsty," she murmured, her voice still weak, but with a clarity he hadn't heard in days. Tears of joy streamed down Ilaro's time-worn face. He rushed to get some fresh water, holding the cup for her with steady, yet still trembling hands. Leah drank slowly, each sip a sign of life. Ilaro felt the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. The cure was beginning to take effect. The promise of Master Gabriel and Arthur, the grandeur of his legacy, all could wait. The important thing was Leah, his little flower, being reborn. He watched her sleep again, a more peaceful sleep, and knew he had made the right choice. The journey had been arduous, but the reward, the sight of Leah recovering her life, was the most valuable treasure of all. The sun began to peek through the window, painting the cabin with a soft golden hue, announcing a new day, a new beginning. Ilaro, exhausted, but with his heart overflowing with hope, knew that the true battle had been won there, in that humble room, with love and faith as his only weapons. The future, with all its challenges and promises, could wait. For now, Leah's life was his sole and most precious triumph. He clutched the parchment, feeling the connection to the past, but with his eyes fixed on the present, on his granddaughter's rebirth. The morning sun, stronger and more promising, flooded the cabin, painting the dirt floor with golden streaks. Ilaro, who had dozed off sitting on the edge of Leah's bed, awoke with a start, his tired eyes, but now full of a new light, fixed on his granddaughter. Leah slept deeply, her breathing soft and regular, her face less pale, a slight blush beginning to color her cheeks. The fever had subsided. Ilaro reached out his wrinkled hand and touched the girl's forehead. It was cool. A sigh of relief, so deep it seemed to come from his soul, escaped his lips. Silent tears streamed down his face, but this time they were tears of pure gratitude and joy. Leah was out of danger. The cure, the miracle he had so implored for, was happening. He rose slowly, feeling the weight of exhaustion, but also a renewed energy. He prepared an herbal tea and some thin porridge, awaiting Leah's awakening. When she finally opened her eyes, there was a sparkle of clarity and curiosity that Ilaro hadn't seen in weeks. "Grandpa, I'm hungry," she said, her voice still weak. But with a sweetness that warmed the old man's heart, Ilaro smiled, a genuine smile that had long been absent from his marked face. He helped her sit up, and Leah ate the porridge with an appetite that was music to Ilaro's ears. That moment, simple and precious, was proof that his journey had been worthwhile. With Leah stabilized and recovering, Ilaro's mind began to turn to the other great challenge that awaited him. The parchment, which he had guarded so carefully, seemed to vibrate against his chest, a constant reminder of the noble lineage he now carried. Arthur and Master Gabriel's promise to help him echoed in his thoughts. It was time to act, not only for himself, but for Leah, to ensure that she would never again know the privation and fear that had haunted their lives. Dignity, justice for his ancestors, all of this now seemed an unpostponable call. He knew the path would be long and full of pitfalls. Claiming a lost lineage, especially one so ancient and shrouded in mystery, would not be easy. There would be skepticism, opposition, perhaps even danger. But his love for Leah was an unbreakable shield, a force that propelled him to face any adversity. He was no longer just old Ilaro, an impoverished peasant. He was the last link of a glorious history, and he had the responsibility to rewrite it. After ensuring that Leah was comfortable and well cared for, Ilaro decided he could not wait. He needed to return to the city, meet with Master Gabriel and Arthur, and begin the process of unraveling and claiming his legacy. He kissed Leah's forehead, who was already sleeping again, a restorative sleep. "I'll be back soon, my flower," he whispered, his voice laden with promise. With the parchment firmly secured and his heart filled with a mixture of apprehension and determination, Ilaro set off for the city again. The path, which once seemed a desperate escape, was now a march towards destiny. He imagined people's reactions, their incredulity, perhaps their mockery. But the image of Leah, healthy and happy, was his beacon. He was not seeking wealth or power for himself, but a secure and dignified future for his granddaughter. Upon arriving at Arthur's house, Master Gabriel was already waiting for him, a look of concern on his face, which turned to relief upon seeing Ilaro. "My friend, how is little Leah?" he asked, his voice soft. "She's better, Master Gabriel. The fever has subsided. She's recovering," Ilaro replied, with a tired but sincere smile. Arthur, who had appeared at the door, also smiled. "Thank heavens. Now, Ilaro, sit down. We have much to discuss. The road ahead is arduous, but not impossible. We will need courage and cunning to present your claim. Society will not easily accept the resurrection of a lineage it considered extinct." Ilaro nodded, his eyes fixed on the two men, ready to face whatever came. The climax was not the end of the journey, but the beginning of the true battle, the fight to rewrite history and secure Leah's future. The true battle Arthur referred to began. Arthur, with his network of contacts and reputation, presented the parchment and Ilaro's story to influential court figures. Master Gabriel prepared him for skepticism, while the image of Leah, regaining her vivacity, was his shield against the discomfort of opulent halls. Ilaro narrated his story with a sincerity that touched some, but met with distrust from others. "A peasant, descendant of nobles? Impossible," they whispered. But Arthur, with his erudition and irrefutable proofs, dismantled every objection. Ancient records confirmed a disappeared Valois heir. The parchment, with its coat of arms and genealogy, was the missing piece, and the jewels, though sold, left a trail of undeniable authenticity. Gradually, the tide began to turn. The truth, once a legend, gained the contours of reality. Ilaro's story, of his quest for his granddaughter's cure and the discovery of his legacy, spread, touching hearts and minds. It was a story of love, sacrifice, and justice that resonated deeply. The human connection so valued by Ilaro manifested in growing support. The turning point came when an old duke, with historical ties to the Valois, recognized the authenticity of the coat of arms and the artifacts. His word, full of authority and respect, silenced the skeptics. From then on, the path opened. The recognition of the Valois lineage, with Ilaro as its worthy representative, was officially honored by consensus. The news of the restoration of the House of Valois reverberated throughout the kingdom. Ilaro sought not power or revenge, but the honor of his family and a secure future for Leah. With the court's support, Valois lands were restored, and a modest but comfortable estate was offered to Ilaro and Leah, a dignified home. Ilaro, with gratitude, took Leah to their new home, a sturdy stone house with a blooming garden and a murmuring stream. Leah, recovered, ran through the fields, her eyes shining with the joy and health Ilaro had dreamed of. Her laughter, once faint, was now a vibrant melody that filled their days. The past of privation and fear seemed a distant memory, replaced by security and affection. Arthur and Master Gabriel became frequent visitors, loyal friends who shared his joy. The historian documented the history of the Valois, immortalizing Ilaro's legacy. Master Gabriel observed Ilaro's transformation, who, though humble, carried an unwavering dignity, a spark of purpose in his eyes. Ilaro and Leah's life was one of security, peace, and purpose, not ostentation. He used his new position to help the village, ensuring that no one else suffered the privations he and Leah had faced. He founded a school and a fund for medicines, a testament to his altruism and the human connection that saved him. Leah grew up strong and happy, aware of her family's history and her grandfather's sacrifice. She was the personification of hope, the bright future Ilaro had fought to build. Ilaro, sitting in the garden, watching Leah play, felt a deep peace, agony replaced by serenity, misfortune by a legacy of hope. He had rewritten the future, for himself, Leah, and the memory of the Valois, honoring them with a life of justice and altruism. The years unfolded into a tapestry of sunny days and tranquil nights on the Valois estate. Leah, now a radiant young woman, displayed the vitality and intelligence Ilaro had always known she possessed. Her eyes, once clouded by illness, sparkled with insatiable curiosity and a deep love for the world her grandfather had given her. She not only benefited from the legacy, but embraced it, dedicating herself to the school Ilaro founded, teaching the village children with the same passion and kindness he had taught her. Leah was living proof that hope, once ignited, could illuminate generations. Ilaro, with whiter hair and slower steps, often sat on the stone bench in the garden, watching Leah interact with the children. His face, once marked by worry and hunger, now bore the lines of wisdom and a profound serenity. He saw in every smile of Leah, in every child learning to read, the materialization of his sacrifice and his struggle. The fund for medicines he had established had saved countless lives, and the village, once forgotten, flourished with a prosperity and sense of community that were a silent testament to the man who dared to dream beyond his own misery. Arthur and Master Gabriel continued to be pillars in his life, friends who shared not only his victories, but also the quietness of his days. Master Gabriel, with his tireless pen, had completed the history of the Valois, a revered tome that narrated the fall, the concealment, and the glorious restoration of the lineage. With Ilaro as the unlikely hero, Arthur in turn ensured that Ilaro's legacy was protected and that justice continued to guide the family's actions. Ilaro, at the end of his days, felt no regret, but immense gratitude. He had set out in despair, seeking a cure for his granddaughter, and had found not only that but the truth about himself, the honor of his ancestors, and the ability to transform the lives of many. The royal carriage, the chest, and the jewels had been the catalysts, but the true treasure had been his unconditional love for Leah and the unwavering strength of his spirit. He had rewritten not only the future of his family, but that of an entire village, leaving a legacy of altruism, justice, and human connection that would echo for centuries. Ilaro's life became a legend, a reminder that even in the deepest shadows, hope can flourish and dignity can be restored, transforming misfortune into a beacon of light for all. He closed his eyes, a gentle smile on his lips, feeling the warmth of the sun and Leah's love, knowing that his journey had been complete and truly blessed. The stillness that followed Ilaro's last breath was not one of emptiness, but of a deep, almost tangible peace. Leah, kneeling beside the bed, felt her grandfather's wrinkled hand slowly grow cold beneath hers. Warm tears streamed down her face, not only from sadness, but from immense gratitude and love for the man who had given her everything, including his own life. She leaned down and kissed Ilaro's forehead one last time, smelling the familiar scent of earth and herbs that had always accompanied him. The sun, which had previously bathed the room in a promising golden light, now seemed to envelop Ilaro's sleeping body in a veil of serene farewell. The days that followed were of respectful mourning, but also of silent celebration. The entire village, once forgotten and impoverished, united to honor Ilaro's memory. The children from the school he founded brought wildflowers, placing them gently at the door of the Valois house. The villagers, whose lives had been touched by his generosity and altruism, shared stories of his kindness, his courage, and the hope he had planted in every heart. Leah listened, her own heart heavy with longing, but also warmed by the love and respect her grandfather inspired. She saw in every loving glance, in every gesture of support, living proof that Ilaro's legacy was far greater than any noble title or material wealth. It was a legacy of human connection, justice, and unwavering love. Arthur and Master Gabriel, with the dignity and loyalty they had always shown, remained by Leah's side. Master Gabriel, with his voice choked, read excerpts from the tome he had written about the House of Valois, highlighting the part where Ilaro, the humble peasant, became the link that united the glorious past with the promising future. Arthur, in turn, offered Leah his unconditional support, ensuring that the administration of the lands and funds would continue to be carried out with the same integrity Ilaro would have desired. Leah, with her head held high, felt the weight of responsibility, but also the strength that came from knowing she was not alone. She had grown up under Ilaro's tutelage, learning from him not only to read and write, but to see the world through the eyes of compassion and justice. Now, it was her turn. With the same silent determination Ilaro had shown on his journey, Leah took the reins. She continued to oversee the school, dedicating herself with fervor to each child, seeing in their curious eyes the same thirst for knowledge she once had. The fund for medicines, which had saved her own life, was expanded under her management, reaching even more needy families. Leah walked through the fields of the Valois estate, now her home, feeling the gentle breeze and imagining Ilaro there, smiling with pride. She remembered his words, his advice, and felt his presence in every blooming flower, in every child's laughter echoing through the village. Life continued, and with it, Ilaro's legacy flourished even more vibrantly. Leah, with her youth and altruistic spirit, was the personification of the hope her grandfather had sown. She was not just the heir to a noble name, but the guardian of a promise. The kindness, justice, and love for others would never be forgotten. Sitting on the stone bench in the garden, the same one where Ilaro spent his final hours, Leah watched the sunset paint the sky with shades of orange and purple. A gentle smile appeared on her lips, a reflection of her grandfather's smile. Ilaro's journey had been complete, yes, but the story of the House of Valois, rewritten by him, was just beginning, and Leah was ready to write the next chapters with the same light and purpose. She felt the connection to the past, the strength of the present, and the promise of a future guided by the values Ilaro had so bravely defended.